All right, everyone. Welcome back into another live edition of the Patriots Beat Podcast here on the CLNS Media Network, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks and Game Time. It is Brian Hines back as always with Alex Barth. We got some movement on the Patriots coaching staff, really since the last time we've been on, which was last Thursday. They waited till we got off as usual to, start bringing all this news to us. And then it was a fantastic football weekend. It's going to continue into tonight with the national championship coming up here soon. So we will talk about all of that. Some great snow football too, especially yesterday in the divisional round of the playoffs that we'll make sure to touch on. But we will start with that Patriots coaching staff. We have people coming back. We have people leaving. We have some interviews and more people coming in potentially, but we'll start with those coming back in the latest news on Monday, and that's special teams coordinator Jeremy Springer. He will be retained by Mike Vrabel. I'm guessing that Tom Quinn, assistant, will stay under Jeremy Springer. He has some familiarity with Vrabel. He was a special teams coordinator in Tennessee, but Barth, this kind of seemed like the one where if you were going down the Patriots coaching staff of last year, you're like, okay, this might be the easiest kind of retain for Vrabel on the staff. And I would say it was a good move keeping Jeremy Springer in there to lead the special teams group again next year.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Mike Vrabel worked with Tom Quinn in Tennessee, and it was a good unit last year, so you're probably not going to blow out the guy who ran it just to promote his assistant. So, Tom Quinn, I think he's in his 60s, right? Like, he's run his own unit. He
was one of the oldest coaches. He might have been the oldest coach on staff last year.
Oh, he's 56. That's why he felt so much older, because everybody was like my age. But he's kind of been around the block, so he knows the deal. Springer ran it last year. They did a good job. Makes a ton of sense. It doesn't mean there shouldn't be turnover elsewhere. There will be. I think at this point, outside the quarterback position, we're insured complete turnover on the offensive side. Defense, we're still waiting to hear about a couple different guys, but that's one guy I know people are like, turn the whole staff over. Last year sucked. The special teams units, they had their warts, but for the most part were solid. If you want to do this thing, and I think it's I hate these numbers, but for those who are interested, there's second ranked special teams unit overall by PFF. So it makes sense.
The DVOA was, are you a DVOA guy?
No, it's a made up number.
No, I mean,
what's the formula? What's the formula?
I'm not a math guy. I don't know formulas.
No, nobody knows. It's a secret. He doesn't tell people.
Oh, really? That's just not. Oh, okay.
That's either DVOA or EPA. It's one of them. But you get my point.
I think DVOA is out there because that's like adjusted for situations and opponents and everything like that, which I think is probably better than EPA and all that. But, under Springer, or the last 2 years under Belichick, they were 32nd and 28th in a special teams DVOA. Springer comes in here, they jump up to 13th. You mentioned second in PFF, which, PFF grades are what they are. But I think one of the most impressive parts about his job too, that he did was it was a lot of young guys, a lot of rookies, right? Like you lose Matthew Slater, you have Marcellus Dial out there at gunner, you have an undrafted free agent Del Pettis as your personal protector, a lot of other guys, a lot of young guys mixed in that group too, and even Brendan Schooler, which was someone we were talking at the end of last year, right? Like penalty problems, some missed tackle issues. We were kind of wondering like, okay, what kind of version of Brendan Schooler are we going to get? And then he gets in here. Springer had some familiarity with him already, and now he's first team All-Pro, their lone Pro Bowl guy. The path just, gets right for Brendan Schooler under Jeremy Springer. So I thought that was probably their best unit this year, and good to see Jeremy Springer. And we would imagine Tom Quinn stays around to continue running that as well. Maybe have to find a kicker now. That's one thing that they'll have to do. Joey Sly's a free agent, so get to work on that kicker position. But overall, impressive from that special teams unit, and good to see Jeremy Springer back running that again. So that was the lone retain, as if you want to call it, so far from what we've heard. But we have some coaches since the last time we spoke that are moving on, and one that was officially announced this morning going to the Cincinnati Bengals along the offensive line, Scott Peters, as well as assistant Michael McCarthy, who assisted Peters here as kind of he was a general assistant, but spent most of his time on the offensive line. They will be going same roles to the Cincinnati Bengals. So new offensive line coaches for the Patriots next season. We'll still see about Robert Kugler, who was an assistant. He's coaching the Shrine Bowl, so we'll see if he plans to stay around, what Vrabel has in store for him. But new offensive line coach next year, as Scott Peters and Michael McCarthy are off to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I thought Peters did a good job this year, relatively speaking. I've kind of talked about this before. The Patriots' offensive line was bad, but it probably should have been a lot worse just based on the personnel that was available. And I think Peters did a good job getting what he got out of the group that was put to his disposal. Now, it's not like Dante Scarnecchia just walked out the door or anything like him. I don't think he was the guy you had to keep, but if we're going to place blame for the offensive line being what it was, it's Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh much more than Scott Peters and his staff. So he'll have better players to work with in Cincinnati. I think that's a good hire by the Bengals. Now we see, I don't think it's a guarantee. Like, I guess let me put it this way. There's certainly room to upgrade the offensive line coach. I don't think it's a guarantee that they upgrade though. Like you still have to go out and make a good hire. So we'll see who they get.
Yeah, it's really tough to evaluate the job he did last year just because of the injuries, the roster turnover, right? Like their starting left guard was Michael Jordan, who they signed to like a futures deal at the end of the year. He ended up on waivers halfway through the year. Their starting right tackle was DeMontre Jacobs, who was, claimed off waivers at the roster cutdown day. We had the whole Ben Brown thing. Like there were injuries, there was roster turnover. It was just devoid of talent in general. So it was kind of tough to evaluate Scott Peters. I will say, I don't think you saw someone like Layden Robinson, who was in there a lot. Like, I don't think you saw much development from Layden Robinson throughout the year, like still kind of the same mistakes as the year went on, specifically in pass protection. I tweeted this earlier too, like maybe the whole strike system thing, which, Peters tried to implement, maybe it was just too complicated, right? Like Scar used to say, like, keep things really simple. I found his quote, like, we ain't building rockets here, right? Like this is simple, right. Just step and block the guy in front of you. Maybe that whole strike system kind of was overcomplicated, especially for some of the young guys. Like City So just disappeared off the face of the earth after starting 12, 13 games last year. So maybe it would have been better with good talent, right? Like 12 offensive linemen they started this year, 10 different combinations. It was a mess. But as you said, they're probably, if they play it right, they probably could upgrade still at that coaching spot there. But
yeah, I'd agree with that.
The other big kind of departure on the offensive side of the ball was the wide receiver position. Both Tyler Hughes and assistant Tyquan Underwood are moving on. That was a position we pegged and looked at a lot this year. When you have two rookies, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, not developing as you would have hoped. So kind of expected that they moved on. We've talked a lot about that, but just thoughts on that and anyone you're eyeing, the Wes Welkers of the world to maybe come in here with Vrabel as that wide receiver coach.
Yeah, I mean, they needed a new wide receivers coach. This one was a no-brainer. Welker's one name. I still like the idea, and I don't know if there's a connection between him and Mike Vrabel, but I just think Sean Jefferson's a damn good coach. And if you can get him to come in and coach wide receivers, the other name I wonder about is
he'll be Jefferson was Jets too, right? So there'll probably be some movement with their new coach.
Yeah. And I would think he'd be one of those guys. Like you see coaches, like we saw DeMarcus Covington, right? Hasn't technically been fired, but he interviewed with the Bengals. I wonder if you could do something like that. The other name I wonder about, and this might be a little bit of a stretch, but there's just a connection. So I'm curious, is Hines Ward, who's been the wide receivers coach at Arizona State, I think for 2 years now. He played with Mike Vrabel in Pittsburgh. So those two, they overlap there for a couple seasons, some familiarity if they want some of that college feel. He just joined Arizona State this year. But another, if you want like a guy with league experience, which I think would be good, then
you want Hines experience. Ward. They need some experience in that room.
Well, he's not as much of an experienced coach, so I guess that changes it. But
yeah, but Rob Moore was the other one, just because he was Vrabel's wide receivers coach the entire time he was in Tennessee. He did hold the same role with the Panthers last year, so I don't know if he can get out of that contract, or then we're talking like pass game specialist coordinator, giving him some sort of elevated title.
He did a good job with Jalen Coker, so
yeah, and so he was there for AJ Brown's rookie year, but then he would have been there for Treylon Burks' rookie season. So mix and match, whatever one you want to look at there. But
Treylon Burks might have just been bad. I'm just going to,
yeah,
I said that at the time. Treylon Burks just might have not been good.
That's fair. That's fair.
He's one of those guys. I know I'm always like, well, it's the development and it's not just drafting the right player. I always say drafting the right player is half of it. I don't know that you were ever getting that half with Treylon Burks.
Yep. Oh, I forgot they had the ghost of Julio Jones too. I was looking at their receiver corps.
They love those old players, Brian.
They do. They do. They do. And so maybe Rob Moore, they can find a way to get him out of Carolina. And I mean, Ohio State national championship tonight. We have to mention Brian Hartline, right? Like the god of all wide receiver coaches. That has to be mentioned when you talk about wide receiver coaches. Maybe if he's interested in moving up, we heard there were some reports that, Josh McDaniels spent some time around Ohio State at the college level. So if he's the OC and there's some connection with Vrabel and Ohio State, maybe it is Brian Hartline, which the success with Ohio State speaks for itself at that position.
That'd be great. I just don't know what's changed now that, he really there hasn't been a ton of noise externally, at least, about him wanting to move, unless it's all right. He got his national title. Now it's on to the next. I don't know what changed now that he's going to move. Ryan Day is not going to lose his job. He's saved his job at this point. So,
yep. Weren't they? Who had Chip Kelly too? Was that Mike Reese, out of the box OC candidate? Chip Kelly on that Ohio State staff?
Yeah, I know some people have floated Ryan Day because I guess
if he wins, Vrabel was go to the NFL.
Well, no, I guess when Vrabel was hiring in Tennessee, he kind of went hard after Ryan Day. So there's a connection there. But if you want Ryan Day and Ryan Day is not available, it makes sense. I don't know that I would hire him. I don't think he'd be at the top of my list. But if we're just going to put the line of thought together, yeah, I think Chip Kelly should be on your list if you're trying to think of logical Patriots offensive coordinator candidates.
Yeah, plenty of experience if you're looking for experience as that play caller. So
61, he's older than Tom Quinn.
He's 61. I guess he's been around a while. When was he the Eagles coach? That was early.
That was 10 years ago.
That was early Nick Foles, right? That was first
13 to 15.
13 to 15, yeah. Okay,
right,
he has been around a while.
His annual salary happens to be on his Wikipedia page. He's making $2 million a year, so you're probably going to have to make him the highest paid
offensive
coordinator in the NFL. Oh.
$2 million at Ohio State, jeez, for an OC, good for him.
Good work if you can get it.
Yeah, clearly, and he was even going to
unceremoniously let go by UCLA.
He was even going to be co-offensive coordinators with Billy O. Remember?
No, it was good. No, it was going to be Billy O and Hartline, and then Billy O went back to.
Oh, and then they got Chip.
BC, and then they hired Chip Kelly. Yeah,
that makes more sense. Yeah, I thought it was going to be both of them. I'm like, you're paying him $2 million to be a co-offensive coordinator, but that path makes a little bit more sense there. But yeah, maybe Chip Kelly. We'll see that Ohio State offense later tonight, but. Two more departures, and then there were some offensive coordinator interviews that we can actually talk about, but two other departures of note: Taylor Embry, running backs coach, and Bob Bicknell, tight ends coach. Maybe Bicknell was a little bit of a surprise. That tight end room played well last year, and he had a little overlap with Vrabel when Vrabel was a player in Kansas City. Bicknell was the tight ends coach for the Chiefs way back when. But ultimately they decide to move on. And skill development coach Joe Kim, who's been with the team, the last 8 years, helping those pass rushers there with another mixed martial arts guy, but Joe Kim moving on as well. So that's more offensive coordinator. We'll see. They'll probably bring in their guys for tight end, running back, all those type of stuffs. But we'll note that those guys are out there, Bob Bicknell and Taylor Embry again. So, any last thoughts on those guys moving out, or we can move on to
Bicknell's a little bit of a surprise, overlapped with Vrabel in Kansas City. The tight end room was solid. But again, it's one of those things, like I said with Peters, like I said with Bicknell, and I'd apply this to Alex Van Pelt too. Those guys individually didn't do a bad job. They weren't amazing, but they didn't do a bad job. I think making any one of those guys the fall guys would have made a mistake. But if you're going to clean house, you're going to clean house. That totally makes sense to just reset the thing all the way. So
let me ask, you mentioned Van Pelt. it's the only futures we haven't heard from on the offensive side are Van Pelt and TC. Are you
And Ben
thinking
McAdoo.
TC McCartney, quarterbacks coach, and Ben McAdoo?
Yeah.
Do you think they're involved at all in this search? Like that Van Pelt might get an interview here, or do you think this is just kind of full clean house?
Well, I've said, like, I think Vrabel should absolutely interview Van Pelt for the offense coordinator position, at the very least, just to, get in a room as an excuse to get in a room, sit down, and figure out what worked for Drake May last year and what didn't. Right. So I'd hope he at least interviews for it. I know that there's the idea out there of him, staying in a lesser role. I'll still believe that one when I see it. It really doesn't happen in the NFL. It's super rare. I can't imagine McAdoo's going to be back in as high a role as he was. It's pretty close to the offense coordinator, the head coach. Is he going to have any relationship with whoever that guy is, with whoever the offense coordinator is? Probably not. I don't think he has a relationship with Vrabel. And then TC McCartney, it's kind of the same thing where, all right, you offense coordinator, especially if it's a different system, is going to want his own quarterbacks coach. How does he fit into the picture? Things like that. So, and even if Van Pelt stays, okay, Van Pelt's now your quarterbacks coach. Is McCartney also taking a demotion? Is he now assistant? So I'm not writing off Van Pelt yet. I think McAdoo is probably out. Just a guess. It's not reporting, just a guess. And then we'll see with McCartney. I guess it would depend on what happens with Van Pelt.
Yeah. It's tough because you would love to keep, McCartney or Van Pelt just to keep some continuity with Drake May. But if you do get someone, like Josh comes in here and it's a complete different system, stylistic. I know they're both like left foot up guys, but you imagine, like, are you going to keep someone who teaches something completely different as your offensive coordinator? Probably not. So we'll see. They're still around. Again, they're the only ones on the offensive staff from last year who have yet to announce they're taking another job or that they're moving on. So they're still around, it looks like, as of now, but we will see what happens with those guys future. So before we talk about those offensive coordinator interviews that happened over the last few days, I want to tell you guys more about Prize Picks, where you just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. And make sure you join in because playoff time is almost over. But even when the playoffs end, you can extend your lineups to the football, or not football, but basketball, hockey, any other sport on there. March Madness is starting soon, and it's now or never on Prize Picks, so don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action. Again, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs, where you can win, again, up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks, and they put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes, and Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. So download Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup on Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's talk offensive coordinators. We got 2 interviews on the books for Mike Vrabel as he starts to fill out the staff. Thomas Brown, who was the basically held every role title for the Chicago Bears last year, from like passing game coordinator to interim offensive coordinator to interim head coach and offensive coordinator, someone they interviewed last year as well when Gerard Mayo was trying to fill this position. So Thomas Brown interviewed, I believe that was last Tuesday. And then they brought in Marcus Brady, who was the Chargers passing game coordinator last year. He has play calling experience, was an offensive coordinator with the Indianapolis Colts a few years ago. So 2 interviews on the record for now. We're still waiting to hear from anyone else, but what were your kind of thoughts on those 2 guys in those 2 interviews there?
Thomas Brown's an interesting one. I know things didn't go super well in Chicago last year, but that was kind of above him. And that's a guy that got some real thrown in the fire experience last season. So, Marcus Brady, a step away. I actually remember watching him play in the CFL a little bit, which is odd.
3-time Grey Cup champion, Marcus Brady.
3-time Grey Cup. He's a CFL legend. Those are guys that, Thomas Brown's qualified offense coordinator. Marcus Brady's more a guy that you interview and, maybe put on staff. Maybe he gets like a quarterback's coach job or something like that. I know this was brought up. I think Evan brought it up that they're both Frank Reich guys, right?
Yep.
So if you were to hire like Frank Reich or somebody from that tree as an offense coordinator, those are guys you bring in. I think what they were waiting on was the Rams to lose, because now you get into a lot of these names we've talked about, LaFleur, Dave Rangone, the Nick Haley.
Kelly.
I think that'll kind of open the floodgates a little bit. So, and then there's still the Josh McDaniels of it looming, but I don't know. And Mike Reese kind of talked about this morning with Thugger and Maz. Like, I don't think Josh McDaniels is a lock. This is like, we knew pretty quickly it was going to be Mike Vrabel, right? For all the back and forth we did about Ben Johnson, that was kind of just to have the conversation. We kind of knew early on it was Vrabel. McDaniels being talked about the same way. I wonder if it's, and that doesn't mean it can't be McDaniels. It very well can be. Like I still wouldn't be surprised.
Was it Rappaport who said he was the favorite over the weekend?
Yeah, I think he's the favorite, but I wonder if one of those Rams guys can really blow them away.
Yep. It is interesting with Josh, like everyone else they bring in here, like you mentioned Frank Reich, who Marcus Brady coached under, Thomas Brown coached under. Like that is a very different system than kind of Josh's, right? Like it's more of that West Coasty, which is what
that's
Vrabel,
more like West Coast air raid. That's not even like the same. It's closer to Van Pelt's, but it's not the same as Van Pelt's.
Yeah, but it's more of, it's different than Josh, and it's more of what Vrabel ran in Tennessee. So you get the connection there, which, then turning to Josh all of a sudden would be kind of a weird, or not weird. It would just be like a completely different pivot. So definitely think Josh is still, a candidate, even though we haven't heard that he interviewed, but definitely still think he's probably at the top of the list. But it would be different from the two guys they brought in here and those Rams coaches. The one thing I will say, Mike LaFleur is someone we talked about. I was reading some stuff over the weekend. I don't think Vrabel ended the Vrabel Matt LaFleur tenure in Tennessee. I don't think that ended very well. Reading back some stuff, it sounded like if Matt LaFleur didn't take the Packers head coaching job, that he was going to get demoted or maybe even fired for Arthur Smith if he returned to Tennessee. So I don't know where maybe the family connections are and how, Matt LaFleur's brother, Mike LaFleur, feels about maybe going to work under Mike Vrabel. I get the connection with the names and, seems like a good choice now being the offensive coordinator under Sean McVay, coming here and getting to call plays. But that was just something like, I don't know how Mike might feel like, and how the relationship kind of ended, where Mike's running to go, work for Vrabel, who was maybe going to fire his brother back in Tennessee, 6-7 years ago, whenever it was.
By the way, so here's the quote from Mike Reese this morning. Or it was a couple of individual quotes that pointing out McDaniels had never coached with Vrabel before, and it said, "I think that's significant." And then I don't have any firm reporting on what direction Vrabel wants to go. So again, it doesn't mean that McDaniels is out of it, but I don't think this is one of those things where it's like, all right, handshake behind closed doors. We got to make it look like a process. Okay, boom, here you go. I think it is a real process. I think this is more so than the offensive, than the head coaching thing was. I think this is a real process.
So any other names you thinking outside of those Rams guys? Like Josh McCown, it doesn't sound like he's going to go anywhere unless he gets a head coaching job. So that was someone with the Drake May connection, kind of cross him off the list. But anyone else that you think might be deserving of an interview here?
So this is another case where I might interview this guy for the offense coordinator job. He's probably a step or two away, and then try to get him on staff. And people have watched this show going back to Evan know I think that this guy's a great coach. And no, it's not Luke Steckel, Brian. I see you grinning. That's the guy I've been talking about. It's a guy named Holman Wiggins. Holman Wiggins was the wide receivers coach at Alabama in 2019, 2020. Obviously worked with a ton of talent during that time. I remember, and this was when the Patriots were hiring a wide receivers coach, kind of asking people at Alabama, because there's a Saban, Belichick, just the idea at the time was, why doesn't Bill just go down to Tuscaloosa and get the guy that's coaching those wide receivers? It's pretty good. So, and I guess when there was some staff turnover there around that time, that was the one guy that Saban wouldn't let other teams interview. That was the one guy that Nick Saban was like, no, I need this guy. Actually promoted him to assistant head coach. So he was the wide receivers coach in 19 and 20. And then he was the assistant head coach and wide receivers coach all the way through 2023. When Saban retired, he went to Texas A&M last year. He was the co-offense coordinator and still the wide receivers coach. So we talked about wide receivers coaches before, right? But the fact he's a co-offense coordinator at Texas A&M, maybe you can flatter him a little bit, pump his tires, help him pump his stock. You interview him as an offense coordinator candidate. I don't know if Vrabel's connected to him or anything like that. I don't know that his name would come up inside the building. He's just a coach that I've always been a fan of. And pretty much anytime they do a coaching search on the offensive side of the ball, I like to bring up Holman Wiggins because, hell, if he's good enough for Nick Saban to make him the assistant head coach, yeah, he's probably doing something right.
I remember I wanted him to come when they rehired Billy O a few years ago as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, because there was a connection there.
Yeah.
I think we talked about him a good amount then.
So, hey, maybe Billy O and Vrabel have a great relationship. So maybe he
there's your connection. Good job, Brian.
Maybe he puts a word in, says, hey, if you need a new wide receivers coach, Holman Wiggins down there. I didn't know he went to Texas A&M. Makes sense because Saban left, but
yeah, it's his first year there. I think a lot of that staff, because it's what's his name, brought in his staff from Washington. So
DeBoer,
yeah, one of many bad decisions he made.
Oh, Caleb DeBoer. Okay.
I liked him too, but he's not ready for the SEC.
He was not ready at all last year, but it does seem, even though we haven't heard a lot of candidates, it does seem like it's kind of between, the guys they brought in and then Josh, and then we'll see if those Rams guys come in. Also on that Rams staff, Stretch, John Stryker has been a popular one, director of game management. Basically was Vrabel's, Ernie Adams or Evan Rothstein when he was with the Titans. So sounds like he'll be joining the staff at some point here. If it is Josh, Jerry Shaplinski is on that Rams staff too, who was an assistant here. He worked with quarterbacks from 2016 to 2018, was with Josh in Vegas. So that's someone who you might think will jump over, especially if Josh gets that offensive coaching job. So a lot of guys on that Rams staff who might be coming over there in different roles outside of just even offensive coordinator. So we'll see what happens there. Anyone on the I know the defensive coordinator gets so washed over in all these conversations, but there were one of the Lions coaches who is now free to interview, Terrell Williams. The Eagles linebackers coach, who I'm blanking, I think Bobby King, I'll look it up in a second, but are two names that are going out around there. Anyone that you like for this defensive coordinator position that, again, we don't talk about much because the offensive coordinator is so important, but anyone on that defensive coordinator list you like?
Yeah, I really haven't. It's not something that I've looked at a lot. We're so invested in this offense coordinator search because it should be Mike Vrabel's defense. That was one of the missteps Gerard Mayo made, was I get, wanting to let DeMarcus Covington run the unit, but Mayo was hired in theory because of the work he did on the defensive side of the ball. And at what point, it's not working, you got to step up and be like, no, I'm taking control. This needs to be better. So I'd like to, I'd like kind of an up and coming coach just to kind of, even though you're not going to need a defensive coach to take over in the same way an offense coordinator with Drake May, like if you can get a defensive coordinator and young up and coming defense coordinator in, and you can get him hired as a head coach in a year or two, even if it's Vrabel doing a lot of the work, it shows other coaches around the league, especially young guys, that there is a pipeline in New England. When you establish that, it's going to become easier to hire coaches. So I'd rather that than the veteran, the guys we talked about for Ben Johnson, the veteran former head coach guys that are going to be, kind of been there, done that. That's Vrabel. You don't need that guy. So I'd rather them go younger.
I think it's going to be Terrell Williams, who he's 50 years old. So he's not tight pants version of the defensive side of the ball, right. But he was Vrabel's defensive line coach in Tennessee his whole time. The last year there, he gave him the assistant head coaching title. So that's noteworthy. And then he went to Detroit this year. He was defensive line coach, run game coordinator, really got the most out of that unit, even, down Aiden Hutchinson, down a couple of defensive tackles late in the year. The defensive line to defensive coordinator, just like we saw with DeMarcus Covington, that scares me a little bit. But again, you still have Mike Vrabel kind of overseeing this thing, right? And it does seem like players really like playing under Terrell Williams. So I would bet, not speculating here, but I would bet that Terrell Williams is probably one of the favorites. And Schefter, he did the candidates to replace Aaron Glenn on staff, he did not put Terrell Williams on the Lions staff. So that would signal that maybe he's looking at elsewhere there. So Terrell Williams
been dropping some interesting stuff. I don't know if you saw the other thing too, where when Ben Johnson got hired, he was like, the coaching cycle's off and running. The Saints are interested in this guy. The Jags are interested in this guy. The Jets. He didn't mention the Cowboys. I don't know. Did you notice that? By the way, you're grinning. I'm guessing you noticed that.
Oh, no, I was going to say he said the coaching cycle is off and running, even though Mike Vrabel got hired like a week ago, just because everyone
I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what he said. I think he was like, we're in like the second phase now or something like that. But
no, he literally said he said, and so the hiring cycle is now off and running. That was what he said.
Oh, okay. And then, but he lists.
Everyone knew Vrabel was just such a lock to come here. It didn't even count, basically, is what he was saying.
But then he doesn't mention the Cowboys, which I thought was awesome. They're going to do something weird.
Deion Sanders.
I believe it. I could see it. I could totally see it.
That would be, as someone who has no investment in the Cowboys, that would be so fun. Just from an entertainment perspective, like I'm all for Deion Sanders going to the Cowboys, but
yeah,
we'll see. So Terrell Williams would be my pick for DC, or Bobby Kane, Eagles linebackers coach, another guy who's got a lot out of his players. Bobby Kane signed Zach Braun in free agency. Chef kiss. I'm good with that one. So those two guys, again, we're not looking at defensive coordinators much. All the attention's on offense, but those two guys both have ties with Vrabel, would be at the top of my list there, I believe. So any last thoughts, coaching staff, anything in general, or we can move on and talk about some of those games this weekend and the game coming up here soon tonight.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the coaching staff.
All right, so before we talk about some of the games, I want to tell you guys about Game Time. And if you want to go to any of the conference championships next weekend, or if you want to, where's the national championship tonight? New Orleans?
Atlanta.
If you're down in Atlanta and you want to run over to the national championship, make sure you guys use Game Time to get your tickets. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, because it filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. If you want to go down to the link next weekend for Commanders at Eagles NFC Championship, cheapest get it right now, $600 on the Game Time app. Great game though. Jaden Daniels is playing some great football. So Pats fans, if you have any reason to want to go down there to Philly, close enough, watch a game, make sure you use Game Time. So head there for their lowest price guaranteed, and other in-app features such as seat views, all-in pricing, and of course Game Time Picks, which makes it even easier to save more on your sports, concerts, comedy, and theater tickets, any tickets you are looking for, and take the guesswork out of buying those tickets. Again, with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Prices. Did you see the prices at, non-football BC basketball with Cooper Flag in attendance this weekend?
Oh, people love them. Cooper Flag.
They were like $2,000 to get into Conti Forum. That's probably the most
whole state of Maine came down.
Seriously. Probably the most expensive Conti Forum ticket ever.
If you're a Celtics fan and you're panicking, there's your silver lining. Maybe it gets so bad.
Cooper Flag.
They end up in the lottery and Cooper, and then they fix it next year with Cooper Flag.
You want to know what I pulled up the other day after the Bruins game? NHL Tankathon.
Oh,
that's where I'm at right now.
You know what? Hang on, keep going. I'm going to find something. Keep going.
I don't think I've ever been on NHL Tankathon or Boston Sportsman. I don't think.
Why would you? Because this is the Bruins thing. Jim Murray calls them the NHL Steelers. It's exactly what they are.
That's a good comp. That is a very good comp.
And you know what? I think they're probably at a point, and I know people may not want to hear this, and I don't think I'm the first to have this take either. It's not going to get better until it gets worse. They can't just keep being the 16th best team in a 32-team league. And maybe you win a playoff series, maybe you don't, but you're never really a contender. You're never bad, but you're never really a contender either. Even the year they set the wins record, that wasn't like or the points record. That wasn't like a dominant roster. It was just a pretty good roster with two goalies that got absurdly hot. So I think they may need to bottom out in order to get better. They need the draft picks. They need an excuse to clear out the roster. Maybe ownership finally does something about the front office. You should be on NHL Tankathon. I think that's probably where the Bruins need to be right now.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't want to say I am kind of rooting for them not to make the playoffs because like they're going to be the last year's version of the Capitals. They're going to get in and just get boat raced in 4 or 5 games, and then you're going to be picking 17th, and nothing's going to happen. Like,
right.
I'm team. What did Cam Neely call it? Like, he didn't want to say sell. He said retool the other day.
Which, yeah.
And like retool, like trade off some of these guys, like Trent Frederick, the guys you're not going to re-sign.
Can they get anything for Trent Frederick at this point? Like, that's the problem. I'm all for selling, but unless you're going to really blow it up and trade Pastrnak, what are you getting for any of these
the
guys?
NHL trade deadline gets pretty silly. Like, you can really, what's the word I'm trying to say? Rip some guys off on the NHL trade deadline. Like, there was a guy, Tanner Jeannot, a few years ago, who's similar player as Trent Frederick. He produced a little bit better. The Lightning traded like a first, 2 seconds, a third, a fourth, and a 5th round draft pick for him. So look, Frederick's done nothing to help his value, like, because he sucked this year pretty much. But teams will look at him and they'll be like, ooh, big guy, physical, like he'll be great in playoff hockey. We'll give up something for him. So I think they can make a few of those moves on the margin and just recoup some draft capital. Like, they just need to take shots in the draft. They're back at that point. And the other thing, like, if you get some of these guys out, then you have to play your younger players. And the other thing Cam Neely said that drove me crazy was these young guys have to outscore their mistakes. Just like, oh my God, like, you wonder why you can't develop any talent the past few years, because you call these guys up and they make one mistake and then they're summoned to Providence for the next 3 months. And like, that
sounds
doesn't
familiar.
help. Seriously, it doesn't help their confidence at all if they're out there being like, oh my God, I can't make a mistake. Like, I know Fabian Lysell, like, he's not great away from the puck, but the fact that now that he makes one mistake and he's just gone for months, like, that is just not a way to develop young talent and young players. So get rid of some of those, the Trent Fredericks of the world, force themselves to play, Fabian Lysell, Georgi Merkulov. They've got forced into playing Matt Patra, and he's got 3 assists in 3 games since he's come back in. Like, who would have knew that could make a difference? So I'm with the kind of retool, just kind of reset as much as you can, and then it will help you in the long run, because making the playoffs this year, unless something drastically changes, like making the playoffs this year isn't going to do you any good.
Yeah, I'm with you. They got to play the kids. That's a big thing for me. You got to figure out what you have in that group, even if you're playing them as a showcase for the deadline. Like, you got to start playing those kids. Well, we're here, impromptu Boston Sports Minute. You worried about the Celtics?
No, not at all. I'll be worried about them when they're down 3-1 in the Eastern Conference Finals if it gets.
Well, so here's what I don't want to hear from Celtics fans, because no, that's fine. You started here when they lost a couple games late in the calendar year. Oh, it's just December. Right? Oh, it's just January. Time to turn around. They keep, it's just February. Literally, Evan just texted me Celtics are fine, so I assume he's watching.
Are they losing right
I
now?
said this to him last night. Oh, they must be winning. Good for them that they're winning.
They're up 76-49 right now.
Excellent.
Over the Warriors.
Excellent. So maybe this point is moot, but like, oh, it's just January. Oh, it's just February. Oh, it's just March. And then it gets to April and they lose, and people being like, what the hell happened? No, like, I think it's a team that's just, frankly, they won a championship a year ago. They're in the dog days of it. They all had very long off seasons. They just need to be able to flip the switch again. And I'd like for them to flip it sooner rather than later, because you don't want to get down 3-1 and then suddenly you have to flip it and not have that margin for error. So I'm not super worried. I'd like to see him get another score at the deadline, improvement on Sam Hauser. But no, I think that the whole idea that they were going to come in this year and dominate because Steve Kerr, Nike, not giving Tatum his MVP and like the revenge Celtics. That's what opening night was. That's what that barrage against the Knicks was. Now they're just kind of bored. They're just kind of playing with their food, and it's not going well. And I think they can flip the switch again, but I would like to see him do it sooner rather than later, because you don't want to see him fall too far into seeding.
I know the East as a whole is better this year, right? Like the Cavs are up there. Who else is up there are the Knicks good? I'm so like
the Knicks are up there, but I still don't believe in the Knicks. The Bucks are up there, but we know the Celtics have their number.
like seeding wise, because you'd obviously prefer home court in the
Right.
playoffs. Like it's not the end all be all, but if you start dropping these games in the regular season, and then you're all of a sudden the 3 seed, like then you're on the road when you're down 3-1 in the Eastern Conference Finals to whoever you're playing.
There's still really only 2 teams in the East that worry me. The Cavs might be legit. And then this is going to sound weird, the Magic, just because they always play the Celtics so tough. And look, maybe they get bounced in the first round before they play the Celtics.
Didn't they kill them the other day, the Celtics?
Yeah, but that was the first time they beat. I think they're like 2-8 against the Magic in their last 10 or something like that. Like, the Magic have had their number. So, all right, you got anything on the Red Sox?
Well, I could say Red Sox and kind of tie it in with the Patriots. We had that.
Right. Oh yeah,
Chris,
there we go.
Chris Cotillo noted that longtime Red Sox executive Joe McDonald, who is Boston's director of baseball analytics, left the organization in December to work for the Patriots as a senior analyst of football strategy. So not a Mike Vrabel hire because he came in December, but we've talked a lot about that, Patriots analytic department, how it's kind of lacking and their whole football operations is kind of lacking as a whole. So they add a director, what I say the title was there, director of or senior analyst of football strategy, maybe getting some more of your favorite analytics involved there in the front office.
So look, I've said this, if analytics means using like the player tracking when it comes to the draft,
which is what Vrabel makes it seem like he sounds about.
I don't consider it analytics. To me, analytics is imaginary numbers and spreadsheets. That's real tangible data. If they're going to use that, fine. And like if this guy's just here to kind of get the infrastructure in place, fine. This is not somebody I want making football decisions. I don't want them to start getting into, you got to call up to the booth to make sure your decision to kick or not is cool with the nerds up there punching the numbers into the calculator. I don't want that. I want Mike Vrabel coaching the football team. I don't want him just regurgitating, which is what I think it's a pressure point at times between the Red Sox front office and Alex Cora. I don't want Mike Vrabel just being there to be the mouthpiece for the nerds. But if this guy's going to help them implement some of that stuff for the draft, I'm all for it.
Yep. It will be interesting because he wasn't a Vrabel hire. Like he came in December. So who hired him? Like is Vrabel going to be on the
Probably Elliot Wolf. My guess is he's an Elliot Wolf hire.
Probably. But I do on EEI, Vrabel, his kind of 3 things for analytics was 1, the player acquisition, like you mentioned, play speed, estimated play speed, stuff like that you were talking about. The second was health and safety, right? Like you see them wear those sports trackers out in practice. So a lot of stuff like that, like load management, how they construct practice. And then the other was that in-game stuff, like the risk ratio of going for it in different scenarios throughout the game. So that's how it makes it seem like he wants to use those analytics. That was a big thing in Cleveland that he apparently learned about, because the Browns are one of the, league's top teams when it comes to their analytic department. So it seems like that's at least a step they want to go to a little bit more, but we will see how that looks under Mike Vrabel and how much he actually did take from Cleveland. But there's your impromptu Boston Sports Minute to tie it all together. So we'll end. Anything stand out to you from that divisional round of the playoffs? Some great games this weekend, some snow games, which got people like Evan all upset with, no dome football.
It's not precise. I don't know. Catch by Puka Nakua was pretty freaking precise. All 4 teams, here's my big takeaway. All 4 teams that won the yardage battle lost.
Yeah. Turnovers.
So I think when you hear people talk about, the offense this, the offense that, and you got to be able to score 30. You do need to be able to do it, but you can't sell out the rest of the roster building process just to build the pass game. Like that doesn't work. It's not viable. The Chiefs have not scored more than 30 points in a game this year, and they're going to the AFC Championship. And I know that they're kind of an anomaly because they're the Chiefs, but like if you score 35 a game, but you give up 37, the style points don't mean shit. So I think it's just a reminder, the Eagles are a very well-rounded football team. The Bills, as much as it kills me to say it, have become a very well-rounded football team, especially on offense.
Are you team Bills or Chiefs next weekend?
I huge NFC football fan, always have been. Yeah. The Commanders are, for where they are in their rebuild, they got here pretty quickly. I I would say it's pretty, like, they have a good run game. And some of it runs to the quarterback. They have a pretty good run game, good defensive front. They've gotten better in the secondary. Like, you can't just say improve. Well, if the passing game's better, they'll win. Or, well, if they could just rush the passer better, they'll win. Like, yeah, they'll win more games. But to get to this level, you can't just say, all right, well, we'll beef up. We're going to put all our resources. I want them to sign T. Higgins, draft a wide receiver in the first round, and then go, trade for another receiver. No, you can't consolidate the improvement. It has to be spread around the roster. And my one other thought along those lines, and I know I'm not the first one to point this out. I think Evan pointed out, other people pointed out, the job the Commanders did in free agency. And they didn't really, none of the guys they added, I mean, they're good players, Frankie Louvu, Zach Ertz.
There wasn't like a splash.
There wasn't that.
Like a T. Higgins splash.
Right. There wasn't even Calvin Ridley type guy. And I remember saying this last year when it became clear that they were going to do the Packer way and draft and develop. It's all well and good if you want to do that. And if you become a team that streamlines the draft process, you're going to be good for a long time because it is the most effective way to be competitive in the NFL. But the reason it worked in Green Bay and it works in some of these other places is because they had time to build a foundation. And you had Aaron Rodgers, you had some of these other guys in place. You come here, that foundation's not there. You're starting from scratch. And I would have loved it. I remember saying this last year. I didn't need them to go out and sign Calvin Ridley. I just needed them to sign 5 or 6 solid veterans to just give you that floor.
Floor raisers.
Right. While you're drafting and developing, these guys are going to carry it. So you're not, a basement team. That is one of the major differences between the Commanders and the Patriots. The Commanders did that. The Patriots didn't. So, look, we all want to see him go out and get one of these big-name wide receivers this offseason. I still think you can do that. But they're going to need to kind of get some of those mid-level, just solid, veteran, foundational pieces in place at this point. And that's part of the reason, too, I know this conversation is going to come up, that how screwed the Patriots were by winning that game last year. So, Jayden Daniels got to the NFC Championship. Drake May only won 1 game. Drake May doesn't have Terry McLaurin. Drake May doesn't have that offensive line. Drake May doesn't have Cliff Kingsbury. Drake May's not playing with that defense. If you switch the quarterbacks, where are the Commanders right now? If it's Drake May there.
Probably a pretty similar spot. I mean,
right.
One thing I'd say is like, I was a huge Drake May guy, as everyone knows, but Jayden Daniels came into the league with like 30 more starts and 3 more years of experience.
Right.
So there was that element, maybe a little bit more win now, but like if you think Jayden Daniels is doing this on this Patriots team,
right? Absolutely not.
This
is not about Jayden Daniels, and like Jayden Daniels probably is better than Drake May right now because of what you said. He's much more experienced. He's 3 years older, has a ton more starts. But this isn't about it's not like, oh man, if the Patriots had picked second. First of all, they still might have picked Drake May had they picked second. But it's not about, the Patriots picked second, they got screwed. They didn't do all the beating the Steelers in December did not prevent the Patriots from signing a real left tackle. Beating the Patriots in December is not the reason the Patriots went and signed a bunch of guys to extensions that they then didn't play up to, right? Beating the Steelers in December is not why the Patriots chose Jalen Polk over Ladd McConkey. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a great point with free agency, how they attacked it. And I think I said in the in the crossover, maybe that's why outside of the Patriots' first pick, because that's number 4, that's such a huge piece. Like the way they go about free agency, I think is the biggest piece of this offseason, just to get some veterans in here, preferably those who have, championship winning experience, just to help raise that floor. And you hope with Vrabel, he might have some guys he played with in Tennessee, right? Like who he likes and knows and can help do that. So I think free agency is going to be so big for them, even if it's not that huge splash with the $130 million, but if you can go get 5 or 6 guys at different positions, just veterans that you can count on to just raise that floor and help elevate things to start, I think that'll be huge. And then you look at three out of the 4 teams that won, not including the Chiefs, all 3 coaches are kind of like this defensive minded culture builder, right? Like Sean McDermott, Nick Sirianni. and then Dan Quinn. They all kind of come in that Vrabel mold, and a lot of them, high top 10 draft picks. I think every quarterback this week was a first round draft pick outside of Jalen Hurts, and most of those guys were top 10. So if you look at the core, like Drake May and Mike Vrabel, you hope you have that. Now go out and add to that in free agency with all this money, and then you got to nail the top of the draft pick as well to keep building this thing out. So yeah, that was probably the big takeaway I thought from the divisional round of the playoffs. So now it is time to execute, but maybe Washington gives you some hope there. So last game of the weekend, Notre Dame, Ohio State national championship kicking off soon. Who you like? I think you're Ohio State. That was your prediction before this thing started.
Yep.
But who you like, and who you watching from a draft perspective in this one?
I have Ohio State. I said since August, it's the best roster in the nation. Ryan Day or no, that team should win the championship. Marcus Freeman's done a good job. I'm frankly surprised Notre Dame got this far. Ton of credit to them, especially with some of the injuries they've had. But Ohio State's the better football team. Draft-wise, I have a list up on 98.5thesportshub.com, but blindfold yourself, throw a dart at the Ohio State roster. The guy's either a likely Patriot or not draft eligible yet. And how crazy is this? From a draft point of view, there's a lot of names to talk about tonight. On one team, the two best NFL prospects are not draft eligible. They're too young. On the other team, in terms of guys playing, I like Benjamin Morrison, but he's hurt. So on the other team, you could make an argument that their best NFL prospect is their head coach. So it's really interesting. Notre Dame is a couple guys. There's really not a ton relevant to the Patriots, especially with guys like Morrison and Riley Mills hurt. Ohio State is a ton. And it's like even at the same position, the running backs, the defensive ends, the cornerbacks. And I'll still throw Will Howard out there. Like we've talked about this. Can Will Howard, the Patriots not taking Will Howard, but can Will Howard be this year's JJ McCarthy? And if he wins tonight, and if he has a good game tonight, does he suddenly start getting first round buzz? And if there's another quarterback in that top 10 conversation, it changes the value of that fourth overall pick immensely, right? If a team really likes him, it makes the pick more valuable. But, even if he goes in the bottom half of that top 10, well, now maybe the Raiders are less desperate to get up to 6. Now maybe some of those teams there right behind you are less desperate because we'll just wait on Will Howard. So that story is going to be interesting to watch as well.
Yep. Yeah, it should be Ohio State. Their roster is just so talented. And can you trust Notre Dame in a college football championship? Probably not. But so many good players. I'm a huge Emeka Buka fan. We talked about the running backs, the edge players on Ohio State. One guy I did want to ask you about, because I don't think we've really talked about him. We talked about the guy he took over for a lot, but Jason even mentioned it in the chat. Where are you with Dunan Jackson right now? Because he started the year as Ohio State's left guard, and then Josh Simmons gets hurt, and he kicks out to left tackle. He's played pretty well, and people say he has the size to stick out there at left tackle. That's someone who we might be talking about in the Patriots' second pick, wherever that falls, if they trade up. But are you on the Dunan Jackson train that's kind of been picking up steam, I feel like, on Twitter lately?
So it's funny. I just pulled up because I was curious for reference. The Brandon Thorne scouting report on Dunan Jackson. Pro comparison, Michael Jordan.
There we go. Okay. So he sees him as a guard.
That might be an older report. I don't want to throw Thorne under the bus there. I think it is a little bit older. This isn't just a guy that...
These were his first tackle snaps, right?
Right. And that's my point. This isn't just a guy that kicked out to tackle, has been bouncing back and forth. This is a guy that just started playing tackle this year. He's played 4 or 5 games. You know where I'm at with tackle, Brian. Just draft a freaking left tackle, please. Do not get too cute with it. Draft a healthy, functional left tackle. That should not
what if
be...
He is a left tackle now, though. He's playing left tackle.
He might be a real NFL left tackle. He could even be... a guy that he could even end up being like a guy that's played left tackle his whole career, and you have a better idea about it. It's a mystery box in the boat. If Josh Connerly's there, Ariante Ursery's there, I know what those guys look like at left tackle, right? So, he could even be somebody who should have been playing left tackle this whole time. Great, get a guy that's been playing it this whole time, who's healthy. That's where I'm at, and I think it's irrelevant because he's a really good freaking guard.
Yeah,
and I do think there's a chance a team at the back end of the first round that needs a guard just outright drafts him as a guard, because he is a first round guard. He's not a first round tackle, but he is a first-round guard, and I could see a team maybe just grabbing him there. But enough with the trying and I don't mean to get annoyed at you. It's the whole thing. It's not sexy. I get it. It's the offensive line. You're not going to buy his jersey. You're not going to draft him in fantasy. And everybody wants shiny new toy. They know they have to take care of left tackle. So it's how can I wedge this in and get creative and get cute so I still get what I want, but I can still say that I have them addressing the tackle position. So you can't. It's a premium position. You either invest in it or you don't. Half measures are why they're in the position they are right now. He's another half measure guy for me. I wouldn't be, if that's their answer at left tackle, I wouldn't be a fan of it. I think they need to come away with a more convincing answer than Dunan Jackson.
Is he going to the Senior Bowl? I was looking at I don't think so. That's disappointing. He would have been fun to watch at the Senior Bowl just to see where he plays, but hey, he's been decent at left tackle. He gave up 2 sacks in his first game, which came against Penn State. So that was probably Abdul Carter, which that's whiplash, kicking out to left tackle for the first time and going against Abdul Carter. But he hasn't given up a sack since. So I don't know. I get it. Like, just draft a left tackle, but he seems to be holding up pretty well out there since he's been out there. So he'll be Ohio State's left tackle if you guys are watching tonight, if you want to keep an eye on him. Someone that we'll probably be talking about as we keep going on our draft coverage. But we will wrap this one up here tonight. We'll be back Thursday, most likely around our usual time. I'll probably have some more coaching updates to talk about, maybe go back to you guys for a little Q&A. And then next week is all Senior Bowl. So we'll have tons of Senior Bowl stuff coming. Neither of us will be down there in Mobile, but we'll have tons of stuff. We'll be watching practices and all that and keep you guys up to date on what's going on. So in the meantime, you can follow Barth on Twitter at RealAlexBarth. Head over to 98.5 thesportshub.com to read his Patriots coverage over there as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at I am Brian Hines. Head over to patspulpit.com for our Patriots coverage online there as well. Thank you all for tuning in with us tonight, and we will see you guys later this week.
Bye.